these women. They want this to be recognized in a court of law that this was wrong. However, their case was rejected in 2021 by a Belgian court, which said that because this followed the law of the land, Belgian law, at the time, it couldn't be considered a violation of human rights or a crime against humanity. Now, they've appealed that decision. That's the case that's happening today. This was originally supposed to happen in June. It's been delayed until today. Very, very important case for Europe's relationship with its former colonies and also Europe's reckoning with its colonial past.
I'm very, very, very excited to see this lawsuit that I just came across regarding the women of Congo, the so-called mixed race. Now, I've said there before, I don't like this issue of races because it's a false theology that was devised to simply divide people. But anyway, for the sake of the conversation, we'll still use that word mixed race. So members of the mixed race in the Congo have sued Belgium, and it's about time. All right. And now you're going to see a report in a few moments, which gives you a few more details. And those of you that want a little more detail, you can fish out this article or this case on the internet. A number of key Western news outlets are carrying this story, are covering this story. All right, so it's really making big headlines. But I'm thrilled to see this lawsuit. I'm thrilled because for a long time now I've been asking myself, where are the African organizations or African pioneers that would take the West, that will make the West accountable for the crimes against humanity that they committed in Africa, including the fact that up until now they're still holding on to scars in Europe. So many other things, but let's focus on this story. So the story really here is the Belgians, when they came to Congo during the time of King Leopold. I guess it's a few years before and after that, committed crimes against women. They were raping women and even murdering them. A number of these women ended up having children, and these children were thrown into religious institutions as orphans, as if they didn't have parents. So why I'm thrilled about this is because I love justice, and it's about time so many different people in the world saw justice come their way. All right, and in particular, in this particular case, like I said, my bias is Africa because that's where I'm beginning from. All right, even though the arms of injustice have spread all across the globe, but I'm starting from home and then spreading out that way. So I'm happy that these women have taken this step, and a lot more organizations and individuals need to sue the West. They need to sue countries like Germany, France, and many other countries in the West. And we're going to see a lot of these things coming. And as that report states, if Belgium has been trying to cover up, if you like, this case, because they are aware, and according to this report, that's what this report says, because they know that if they admit this, there are a lot more suits that could come their way. It's a lot of money. There could be the bank accounts of the government could be wiped out just by these kinds of lawsuits coming their way. Now, when you think about the fact that there's a lot more that Belgium did in Africa, this is why this for me is exciting. Now, I've said before that it doesn't matter what the West do to cover up crimes, to cover up justice, and to refuse to pay or pay reparations. And imagine here, we're not even talking about reparations. This is before we even touch reparations. All right. And as you heard that report there, it clearly indicates these women might be asking for small money as per individual, but it's the bigger picture that you look at. And when you look at the bigger picture, it's a lot of money because there could be a lot more women coming out also wanting justice. These women are just pioneers in this particular case alone. But like I said, there are many other crimes, minerals that were taken out of Belgium. And I beg your pardon, Congo by Belgium. And here we're only talking about Congo alone. Minerals were taken out of Namibia, Zambia, everywhere in Africa. So all these lawsuits are on their way. So again, it leaves me wondering. You just wonder, why haven't the West, They should have done this long time ago. They should have just come to the table and said, look, come to Africans or whoever it is they've offended, whether it's Latinos, Indians, the Chinese, the Japanese, whoever, and just come and say, look, we've messed up. We just need your cooperation in terms of giving us time, working with us in terms of how we can start to do these exchange programs where we start to give back to Africa. But they're not doing that. Instead, if anything, you saw one of the last videos I did where a congressman from the US was calling Africans thugs. Instead, they do the opposite. Instead, they exacerbate these soured relationships. So, we'll keep an eye on this, but personally, I am excited because this is going to open up a floodgate of lawsuits. And there's many other lawsuits that have come which are not as big as this or as significant, but this one is making big waves all over the world, and everybody is keen to see what will happen in this one. It can't be denied, but we're going to see how the Belgian government is going to play its cards in terms of trying to push this under the carpet, or trying to delay it, or trying to just push it aside. We heard in that report the government was saying, even though an apology was offered, which is an acknowledgement, and it says that these women want more than an acknowledgement. They really have to find their place back in society. Imagine the trauma. And I've done a video here or two where I've talked about the trauma that racism has done, especially the racism that was practiced through colonization and slavery. Many Africans have grown up in very, very serious trauma. It has affected them. It has affected their productivity, affected so many other things. So there's a lot of damage that has been done. And so I look forward to seeing more lawsuits coming up from African governments, African individuals, African organizations, etc. And, talking about crimes against humanity, racially motivated crimes, if you can call them that, I'm personally of the idea that the present generation of people in the West, whether they are leaders or just ordinary citizens, who make light of this history and feel uncomfortable, don't want us to be talking about this history because it's history, it's gone. I personally conclude that they are worse than the people who committed, or the generation that committed these crimes against humanity. Because the person who hides the crime oftentimes is worse than the person that committed the crime. And we know even in law, if you are doing anything that stops authorities from finding out the truth or standing in the way of an investigation, you are a conspirator to the crime. So the governments, such as the government of Belgium in this particular case, by trying to make light of this issue, or trying to run away from responsibility, running away from the responsibility to pay for it, is even worse than the government or the generation of leaders that committed these crimes. And then when you look at the gravity of these crimes, think about the fact that these men, white men, I must add, all right, not only had these children illegitimately, but they did so by raping these women. The rape was not because of some kind of cordial relations or admiration that they had for these women. No. It was simply to brutalize these women, to traumatize them even further, to do everything possible to make them miserable, to make their lives painful. And so not only were these women who have now grown up, who were fathered by men who abandoned them, but it was done through rape. And number 3, these men took the resources of these children and took off and disappeared, vanished, went back to Europe. It's so many things. It's hard to describe this kind of heartlessness. It's hard. You can't find the words to describe how terrible this is. And now when you think about it, you have governments now, such as the Belgian government and its citizens, who now have an opportunity to make up for this. And they're trying to push it under the rug. Instead of facilitating for healing, they keep trying to push issues like this under the rug. Hide. You heard from the report. Maybe maybe I didn't cover that part of that report, the report in this particular segment that I just showed you. But when you listen further, it actually states in that report by France 24, it clearly states that a lot of citizens in Belgium didn't even know about this history. That's how big and that's how serious the cover-up is by the government. They don't even want people to know the truth. They keep wanting to find ways to hide the truth, hide this history, so that people never know. And it just shows you that they are continuing the legacy of their forefathers. They are continuing the racial crimes of their forefathers. That's why these issues, this history, cannot just be overlooked and brushed aside. You can't. And these same people come to Africa, governments from Europe, the West, including America, they continue to come to Africa to exploit the vulnerabilities that their forefathers have created. And yet all of these people will tell you they are not racist. They'll tell you they come to Africa as champions of human rights. When we know that the truth is they come to exploit the vulnerabilities that their former leaders, their forefathers created for them, which is white privilege, which is part of white privilege. It is part of white privilege. It is. It's part of white privilege. So this cannot be overlooked. And we'll continue talking about these things and fishing them out one by one until the world sees justice.
And Dave, tell us then a little bit more about what this case is all about.
Well, the reason that this case is being so closely watched is that this was a common practice among European colonial powers in Africa and Asia, that they would take mixed-race children who had been born to a local mother from a European father and put them in these orphanages as if they had no parents at all. The reasons why they did this were kind of myriad and kind of murky in hindsight, but essentially they just couldn't see them as being part of either society, and so then they pretended as if they had no parents. And the reason this is being watched is because this is actually the first case of its kind that could find that practice as having been a crime against humanity. It would have implications for other former European colonial powers. Now, these women are each asking for 50,000 euros each, as was mentioned in the report. It's not a huge amount of money. The most important thing to them is really recognition and restitution for the trauma that they endured. And also, they just want to be able to access information about where they come from, which has been very, very hard to get from the Belgian state.
Let me hear your comments. Let me hear how excited you are also to hear this as we continue to push for justice for Africa. All right. I will see you on the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.